Well, things have gone from bad to worse for the Bad News Bears. Their 21-point blown lead on Sunday has the Bears winless in 2023. But there is a silver lining in Chicago. The Bears currently hold the top 2 picks in the 2024 NFL Draft, which could finally help this team get back to its winning ways. The Bears secured the #1 pick by way of trade with Carolina. If it stands, they would become just one of 2 NFL teams to own the top 2 picks in the same draft. So taking a look at the rest of the current draft order, you see there the Bears with the top 2 pick, but an interesting mix in that top 10. Raiders, Broncos, Vikings closing out the top 5. And then on the other side, you see the Jets, Patriots, the Bengals, who have been disappointing this year, the Cardinals, and of course the Giants rounding out that top 10. A lot to get to. The NFL Draft, of course, takes place in April, but it's never too early to start thinking ahead. So we got the best in the biz to talk about it. Draft expert Ryan Wilson and longtime NFL GM Rick Spielman. Gentlemen, let's talk about those Bears because there's not really much you can say. One of just 2 winless teams so far this year. We know Caleb Williams is the consensus #1 pick, but how could this all play out, Ryan, and benefit the Bears in this situation?
All right, Haley, write this down because we have an official draft countdown clock on the With First Pick podcast. 205 days until the 2024 NFL Draft. I'm stealing Rick's line there. But what does this mean for the Chicago Bears? Well, currently, as we sit here, as you know, they have picks 1 and 2. And this is a layup. The only question is not whether it's going to be Caleb Williams and almost certainly Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver at Ohio State. The question is who is going to be the coach, because Matt Eberflus has certainly struggled in his tenure, just over a season and a half, barely, in Chicago. And the thing that I keep coming back to, and I've talked to Rick about this on the podcast, is you can hire a defensive-minded head coach, but you have to have the infrastructure in place offensively to make things work with your young quarterback. Turns out that Justin Fields wasn't Matt Eberflus's quarterback. He was drafted by the previous regime, so they could conceivably move on from him. But again, this has been a sort of a vicious cycle in Chicago where it's not timed up when you hire the head coach, the general manager, and the quarterback, and there's losing to follow, and that's been the case for what feels like the last decade or so. But I think the easy pick on paper, Caleb and Marvin, quarterback, wide receiver, and start over, and hopefully you get an offensive-minded coach in there. But Bears fans will tell you, Haley, that if there's one team that will find a way to mess this up somehow, it might be the Chicago Bears.
Brian, I have to actually agree with you on this, and nice reference for barely and tenure. He's only been there 2 years, just so you know. But if they do go a different direction with their head coach, they have to marry up the scheme with the quarterback they have. And right now, watching Justin Fields, I think he's still a very talented quarterback, but he's not fitting within what they're trying to do from a schematic standpoint on the offensive side of the ball. So it is Eberflus gets you next year. Make sure Williams' scheme fits his skill set. There's no question about Marvin Harrison being the second one. That would give them a huge spark and hopefully a 1-2 combination and get this franchise turned around.
Rick, let's talk a little bit more about Caleb Williams as a prospect in this draft. We saw him win the Heisman last year. We've seen him carry that performance over into the 2023 season. What is it about Caleb that makes him so special and really makes him that consensus #1 overall pick?
Yeah, everybody's talking about it. When you watch him, I think he's one of those quarterbacks coming out that will be labeled a generational type quarterback. Not only is he a talented athlete, but he has unbelievable arm talent. He can make throws from the pocket. He can make throws when he's off schedule and scrambling outside the pocket. He has excellent field vision, and he's not always looking to run, although he can hurt you with his legs if he does have to run. What he's doing this year is that he's trying to show all the NFL that I can be a pocket passer as well. He's doing a great job with his eyes. He's trying to move the safety off the spot. We still saw that last week against Colorado. So it's really hard to poke a lot of holes in this kid's game.
For Marvin Harrison Jr., Ryan, an electric player all across the board. But when you think about where he plays, Ohio State, he's an impact player in a program that's so prestigious. How special of a kid is he going to be, and what do you think his impact in the NFL will be going forward?
I'm smiling, Haley, because last year Rick and I were at the Ohio State Pro Day to watch C.J. Stroud, of course, and I said to Rick, man, I can't take my eyes off of Marvin Harrison Jr. He said, quit talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not leaving yet. They need him at Ohio State one more year. And he hasn't had quite the year this year that he had last year with C.J. for a number of reasons, but he is truly special. And he is a guy that comes in right away, and you feel like this, what you're seeing here on the screen, transitions to the next level. He is big, he is strong, he is physical, he wins with speed, he runs precise routes for someone that age that just takes your breath away. And I just go back again to that pro day, watching him run routes, yes, against air, but you could peek to your left and to your right and see NFL personnel folks sort of gasping to themselves watching this young man in person. So again, you come to Chicago where they need help at the wide receiver position. Yes, they have DJ Moore. Chase Claypool appears not to be working out. They have Cole Kmet, the tight end, locked down. If you get the quarterback and you get the big-time wide receiver, you're going in the right direction. They feel good about their offensive line. I don't think you take an offensive lineman here if Marvin Harrison Jr. is on the board. And then you rebuild the offense. And look, we have seen in Houston what a franchise quarterback can do in his first month in the NFL. So that's the hope, best-case scenario if you're Chicago, if you get the coach right, should they decide to go down that road.
Yeah, it's just such a strange situation happening right now in Chicago. But as you both mentioned, either of those guys could make a big impact up there. Let's continue the quarterback conversation, though, because it feels like there's some good quarterback options for teams to look at in that draft. Ryan, who are some guys that teams should be paying attention to going into the draft?
Well, it's funny, when you look at the current draft order in the top 10, 7 of those teams need quarterback. The one that doesn't include, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow needs to get healthy. But who else is in the conversation when you talk about these quarterbacks? Caleb Williams is number 1, and that's not going to change. I don't know what would have to happen. Number 2 is going to be Drake Maye out of UNC. He's not in the Caleb Williams category, but he is going to be QB2, and he's going to go pretty high. Top 5 feels about right. And then after that, and Rick and I talked about this consistently on the podcast, QB3, that race is wide open. Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado has had a great season to this point. He probably returns to Colorado. Then you have my guy Spencer Rattler, who's been balling out this season, and I think he's gotten NFL personnel folks' attention. He is going to be a day 2 guy. Perhaps he goes higher than that. Quinn Ewers, Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Cam Ward are just a few names I'll mention, and finally Riley Leonard. That's 9 guys compared to 2 years ago, that draft class. There was only one quarterback that went in the first round, Kenny Pickett. This is going to be a completely different animal, Haley, and we could see 5, maybe more quarterbacks go in the top 32, maybe the top 50. We see 9 or 10. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree with you, except Spencer Rattler. Are you kidding me right now? I do agree that he's gotten better, but he's not in the same class as the world and everybody else, the Penixes of the world, the Ewers of the world. There are a lot of very good quarterbacks in this class, and as the season progresses, they're going to be jockeying up and down for who will be the 3rd quarterback off the board. But right now, I wouldn't put Spencer Rattler up there. And I think Cam Ward, who you mentioned from Washington State, is getting on everybody's attention. He had a big game against Oregon State. That'll be a kid that will be on the rise as well.
Yeah, Michael Penix as well. You mentioned him, Ryan. Really a quietly, sneakily, very talented player up there with the Washington Huskies. Okay, let's talk about Cincinnati, the Bengals, because they are just quite a different team than what we saw from the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Joe Burrow, we know, has struggled with that calf injury, but it's affecting his stats. So the Bengals are here. They have a top 10 pick. Where are some positions or players, Rick, that you could maybe see the Bengals utilize with that top 10 pick in order to help them get back on track?
Well, they've really spent a lot of money on the offensive line, although you can potentially see them go there. They have T. Higgins, who's coming out of contract. Tyler Boyd, he's coming out of contract. Maybe receiver. They don't have a tight end under contract on the roster next year. And Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia, is a unique prospect at the position. Not only is he a great receiver, he's a great guy after the catch. He has excellent hands. Defenses have to account for him. And the one thing that he has done this year is he has shown everybody that he is a blocker as well. This guy is a playmaker. They don't win last week in Auburn without the performance of Brock Bowers. He is a unique tight end prospect. I think he's a more complete prospect at tight end position than when Kyle Pitts came out, who Atlanta took in the 4th overall pick.
Yeah, and Rick talked about it. He's improved his blocking, which was maybe the only concern you had about him. The only question I have, assuming that the Bengals pick 8, I don't know if Brock's going to be there. That's how well he's playing, and he is so versatile. You can line him up anywhere. I'm going to go along a similar vein. I went with Emeka Egbuka, the other quote-unquote wide receiver at Ohio State. We talked about him a lot over the summer. He splashed at times in the early part of the season for Ohio State. Rick mentioned T. Higgins is out of contract. Tyler Boyd could be out of contract. And Joe Burrow certainly flourishes when his weapons are there. You know, we also talked about the offensive line as a potential target, but they have tried to fix the offensive line year in and year out. So I put Joe Alt on the list as well, the left tackle from Notre Dame. Again, I don't know if he's going to be here at this point because he is having a great season and he has been balling out. But I think, assuming they're fine with a healthy offensive line in Cincinnati, you're going to think about the wide receiver position, or in Rick's case, someone like Brock Bowers, who can do a little bit of everything to help that offense.
Yeah, that Brock Bowers one-handed catch that we just showed there in the video, I still can never get over that. It's crazy how good his hands are when looking at the football. Okay, so we are hitting the halfway point of the college football season this weekend, so that means that players are starting to kind of establish themselves a little bit. Ryan, for you, and then Rick, you can follow, who are some players that should be on our radar in the back half of this season that could be rising up the draft boards?
I teased it a little earlier, and Rick is playing gruff with us. He loves Spencer Rattler, not as much as I do. But Spencer, I'll start here. He has made huge strides from when he left Oklahoma after he got benched for Caleb Williams. Transferred to South Carolina last year. And South Carolina he improved last year, but he was right to return to school. And I remember talking to a scout last fall, and he said, look, man, Spencer's a developmental player. He's not a QB1 at this point in the conversation. And here's the things that I think Rick will agree with, and he can tell me in a second. He is incredibly tough. He has a really good arm. He's a better athlete than perhaps we give him credit for. And he is willing to make tough throws. And he has to do it behind an offensive line that made him look like Daniel Jones at times behind the Giants offensive line on Monday night. So I appreciate his toughness. I appreciate the improvements he's made. And I think he has a chance to be a top 50 player. I don't know if Rick's willing to go that far, but I've been happy with the way he's played this season.
The only reason he's rising up your draft board is because my receiver, Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette has had a phenomenal year. Who is Xavier Legette? No one knew about him. He had 18 catches coming into this year, and he's one of those players that maybe like a Jalen Hylett, who rises up the draft boards who no one knew a year ago. He had a big game against UNC, 10 catches, 190 yards. Everybody's scrambling. Who is this kid? This big number 17. He's 6'3", he's 230 pounds. He went out and balled out against Georgia the other week, and then against Mississippi State. He took a touchdown for 77 yards on a slant route. They say he hit over 22 miles per hour. So that's telling me there's a 6'3" kid, 230 pounds, that's probably going to run in the 4.4s when we get to the combine. This kid has came out of nowhere. Excellent hands, excellent body control, tough and contested situation. Xavier Legette, not Spencer Rattler, is my riser in the draft this year.
You can't have a good quarterback without a good wide receiver, vice versa. So you gentlemen both correct in that. Ryan and Rick, thank you so much for your time. The NFL draft will be here before you know it. The Bears better be paying attention to these guys as well. You can stay up to date with the latest draft conversations by tuning in to With the First Pick podcast with Ryan and Rick. They dive into mock drafts, prospects, position rankings, and even some fun interviews. You can catch that wherever you get your podcasts, or you can scan the QR code on your screen.